buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this favorite radio station and or FM translator. It's going to be a fast morning this morning. What's going on? Hello. Hey, how you doing? As you can tell, I got an extra day's worth of sleep, and that was worth it, man. Million miles an hour. It's all good today. You ready to go? You ready to do it? You ready to jump in with both feet? I don't know if I could do this every Monday because, boom, man, what a day. It's going to be fantastic. But we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It is Tuesday. I know. Many of you feel it's Monday, but that's okay. 3-day weekend means a 4-day work week. So feel good about it. Be positive. Be good. It was actually nice yesterday. I actually got a chance to mow my lawn for maybe the final time, ? I hate to say that, but that's what it is. 44 degrees this morning outside the old hacienda. A little crisp. That's okay, though. We are ready to jump into it. Today is Tuesday, and that means the weekly top three. 3 big topics today from Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And then we're going to be joined in hour 2 by Chris Story, the man from Homer, for our weekly positivity update. That's it. That was it. It's all good. I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you got everything you needed to have done. And we'll see what happens. But first, let's just get into it and jump right in. The weekly top 3. Brad Keithley joins us every Tuesday to discuss it for the weekly breakdown of what exactly is going on around the state and around the country and everything else. Mostly all Alaskan issues that have dealings with us here. And he joins us right now. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Did you spike your coffee with an extra Red Bull this morning?
I don't know, man. All of a sudden, I just started talking, and it just started going faster and faster and faster. It was all good. Maybe it was this week. I tell you what, I turned my phone off on Friday afternoon, and I didn't turn it back on until late last night. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting thing. I'm just like, nope, I'm going to turn this thing. And you know what? I didn't miss it at all. I did miss a couple messages about, aren't you on today for yesterday's show? But no, I historically take off Labor Day and Memorial Day. So anyway, but yeah, just turned it off and I feel great. I didn't miss a thing. You know what? I just didn't miss a thing.
So what's Terry's reaction when you get in a mode like this? Is it to run to the hills or?
Yeah, pretty much. She runs away and says, "You are so ridiculous," and then she walks away. But that's okay. She's 33 years of this, and she knows all about it. So it's all good.
That's great.
All right, Brad. Well, let's dive into this. I mean, we got a lot of stuff to cover this morning. And today we're going to start. Now, first and foremost is how the oil companies continue to, and the oil industry as a whole, continue to tout the fact that they are a huge part of the economy, right? I mean, we know that, but they, every couple of years they throw a study together that says, well, look at how much we contribute. Please treat us nicely, is what kind of the feeling is of it. But you say that's just part of the picture for number 1 of the weekly top 3. Hit us with it here.
Right. So last week was the meeting, or late last week was the meeting of the annual meeting of the Alaska Oil and Gas Association, and there was a lot of major attendees. Senator Sullivan, former governor, Texas governor, former Secretary of Energy Rick Perry, and others came and celebrated with them. And in part, and as part of it, they released a new study. AOGA released a new study that showed how important the oil and gas industry is to Alaska. The headline written on the Alaska Beacon by Gareth Rosen is "Oil and Gas Companies Have Outsized Economic Impact on Alaska," says industry study. And they do. The industry affects Alaska primarily in two different ways. One is through the revenue flow, the state's portion of the revenue flow from oil. And that stays fairly consistent, declining volumes, but it doesn't bounce up and down a lot over time. That's sort of always there. Then there's an added piece of it when the oil industry is in construction mode, as they were with Point Thompson in the early 2010s, as they are now with Willow, with ConocoPhillips's Willow project, and with Oil Search's Pikka project. They're in construction mode, and what construction mode really does for the industry, or does for Alaska, is it spikes the number of contractor activity up on the slope. Well, elsewhere, as they build modules and pieces for the slope activity, the construction on the slope, and then the number of employees bounce up because you have all those people involved in construction, and we're going into construction mode now. So it's a great time for the industry to do a study like this, because you've got both the hit of the oil revenues and the hit of construction mode to factor into the equation and show how important you are to Alaska. But there's two things that, as I read this and I read the study, there's two things that hit me that I think we need to balance this importance of the oil industry with. One is the PFD has a similar economic impact. Now, it doesn't have the spike impact when you add in construction on top of the revenue flow. Right. But the PFD is similarly important to the overall Alaska economy. Yet we never see, headlines that say permanent fund dividend has outsized economic impact on Alaska. That's because those in the legislature want to use PFD cuts as a way of funding government growth, and they don't want people to understand. I don't think they don't want people to understand the outsized impact that the PFD has. So every time I read a story about how important the oil industry is to Alaska, I want to see a similar story that says how important the PFD is to Alaska, but you just don't see it. And the reason is politics. It's not because the economics are that vastly different. It's not because the impact is that vastly different. It's because of politics, that people want to use PFD cuts for their own, the 21 plus 11 in the Senate, in the House and the Senate, plus the governor, want to use the PFD for themselves as opposed to sharing it with Alaska families. And that is that always irritates me when you see something about how important the oil and gas companies are. Well, there's something else that's similarly important, and we ignore that. The second thing is, yes, the oil and gas industry is important to Alaska, but headlines like this and studies like this are designed to make you think, well, gosh, we can't do anything to upset it because it's so important to Alaska. We can't look at additional taxes on it. We can't look at additional ways to deal with it because it's so important to Alaska. And that's not true. Right. I mean, there are we have a constitutional mandate. The legislature and the governor has a constitutional mandate to maximize the revenue flow from the state's resources for the benefit of Alaskans, not for the private benefit of companies, for the benefit of Alaskans. And the way one should look at that, I think, is to look at the long term, look at the short, medium, and long term, and say, look, can we get more revenue without, if you can tax the revenue to the point where you can tax the industry to the point where the industry stops investing and then the decline curve goes like that, and you end up with less revenues. You end up with more per unit revenues because of the tax, but you end up with less overall revenues because of the decline curve you put yourself into. But there is a sweet spot where you can tax up to, and even if the decline curve shifts a little down because you're getting more per unit, you end up with more revenue. We did a column on that once in the Alaska Landmine. If people want to understand the concept better, but you need to always be searching for that sweet spot. I mean, Britain does it. Britain changes taxes, frankly, about every year on the oil industry as they're constantly in search of that sweet spot. we get locked in. We Alaska get locked in and say, well, this is the right revenue structure. This is the right split at the time. And in 2013, we hit that right. I think we hit that right revenue structure. We hit that right revenue. This is the right revenue structure at the time. And then, we need to lock that away and go on and never touch that again because it's so important industry. Well, things change. I mean, industry costs change, volumes change, all sorts of things change. And you should constantly be re-looking at the revenue split. Given the constitutional mandate to maximize revenue for the benefit of Alaskans, you should constantly be looking at that revenue split. And what happens is we get headlines like this and studies like this, and people go, well, we can't touch the oil industry. We need the investment. Well, you could get more investment if you drop taxes, and if you eliminated taxes, you get a lot of investment. But that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says, maximize the revenue for current and future Alaskans. And studies like this always irritate me because they don't have that balance in them. They don't talk about no one. I mean, the politicians on the stage certainly didn't talk about, yes, this is great, but are we fulfilling our constitutional duty to maximize the revenue for the benefit of Alaskans?
Right. And this is not just you again, you're an oil and gas guy, and so you understand this stuff. This is the industry you came out of, and you're advocating that there are solutions. I mean, whether it's the Hillcorp loophole or others, I think between our discussions, you and I have talked about, there's $400 or $500 million that could still be on the table there. And that's a significant chunk. You talk about $500 million that could be on the table year after year. That is going to the oil companies that could come to us again to maximize that benefit as per the Constitution. And that's what these studies always come out. And we understand that there's an oversized impact on the economy, but it always comes out as, look at us, please don't hurt us please don't change anything because look at how much we are a part of, kind of thing. I guess that's the cost of doing business, but there are opportunities for us this is a finite resource. We have to capture as much as we can as owners. That just makes sense. And if it has to change every 3 or 4 years, again, that's just the cost of doing business.
Yeah. And you don't want to kill the golden goose. I mean, you don't want to tax them to the point that they stop investment or significantly reduce investment. So you lose money in the long term by trying to grab more in the short term, you lose money in the long term. But if there are opportunities to increase government take without killing the golden goose by maybe affecting the decline curve a little bit, but not so much that you're losing money long term. If there are opportunities for that, you should. I mean, the legislature and the governor have a constitutional mandate to do that. I would almost say they have a fiduciary obligation to do that, to look for those opportunities. And I just don't think we are. I mean, the Department of Revenue, 2 years ago in the 2022 fiscal model included both the effects of closing the Hillcorp loophole and the effect of increasing the tax rates by reducing the per barrel credit by $3. And factored that through and didn't show any impact on volumes. So it was increased revenue, about $500 million, but no decrease in volumes in what they showed in the fiscal model. Now, interestingly enough, under Adam Crum, you can't find that in the FY23 in the 2023 fiscal model. They took out all of those. They took out all of the revenue factors. So you can't determine that from the 2023 fiscal model. But fortunately enough, I downloaded the 2022 fiscal model, so I can still find it and still do the calculations. And they showed that there wasn't any impact. Now maybe there is, and maybe we need to find out what that is, calculate what that is. But I don't see the effort from the administration or the effort from the legislature, to be honest, to go in and do the work that's necessary to maximize the revenue. I will say one other thing. Part of the problem is that when we get into this subject, people go, "Oh, just repeal SB 21," like Joe Pascovan a few weeks ago. "Oh, just repeal SB 21 and go back to where we were." Well, that's wrong too. I mean, you can overreach. You can kill the golden goose. You need to go at this stuff with a scalpel as opposed to a blunt edge instrument and just say, oh, what billion, $1 billion, 2 million, or 200 million. That's what we. No, I mean that's wrong too. I mean that kills the golden goose. That sets us on a reduced investment and on a decline curve that goes in here. It is frustrating to me. It is frustrating to me that we don't see legislators going in. Legislators, Republican legislators who talk about, oh, we have the Constitution this, the Constitution that, the Constitution requires that we do this, who forget the part of the Constitution that says go maximize oil revenues and reduce the burden on Alaskans. That's part of your responsibility. And it's just frustrating when we see, them become cheerleaders like they were at the AOGA meeting, become cheerleaders for the industry instead of cheerleaders for Alaska. I mean, which side are you on?
Wait, don't ask that question. Don't ask that question for sure. All right. Number one of the weekly top three. Give us a quick tease for number two quickly here.
Well, number two is we have another editorial on we need to spend more for K through 12. This one comes from a legislator, and it's frustrating for the same reasons that past ones have been frustrating for. But we're going to talk about that frustration yet again to keep hammering it home.
Wow, it must be Tuesday. All right, the weekly top three, the Michael Duke Show, Brad Keithley, our guest. We continue with more here in just a moment.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay, in the break right now, weekly top three. Yeah, must be Tuesday again. I've got a headache already. It's just, it's frustrating for sure. Let me go back here real quick just to catch up on anything that I missed in the chat room. Brian, I feel your pain, Brian. Brian says over the weekend, he goes, nope. A lot of stuff did not get done. I was a slug to my shame. I think it was a slug-like weekend. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I turned my phone off and I did mow the lawn. My son and I split the duties and we mowed the lawn and I cleaned up a few things and that was it. I got absolutely nothing else done. I just basically let my hair down, what little is left, and relaxed the entire weekend. And it was beautiful. I mean, I had a little guilt, but I pretty much put that aside. Brian said he did go to see Hamilton with his daughter. He said, great show. Thanks to Brad for encouraging my interest. Daughter was on board from the announcement, but he had to be prodded and he enjoyed it. I'm glad that, whatever makes you happy, my friend, that was the good stuff.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Good morning. He says, I'm blaming. Oh, Anthony says he's blaming the new Baldur's Gate 3 video game on my slug status this weekend. I got to tell you, every one of my friends, I was like, where is everybody? And they're all like, we're all playing Baldur's 3. Ugh, hate you all. Anyway, I didn't jump on that bandwagon yet, Anthony, but maybe one of these days I'll jump on that bandwagon. All right. Let's see. Anything else? Oof, a lot of verbosity there. How was your weekend, Brad? Did you actually get anything done? I know you're visiting mom and everything, but did you get anything fun done over the Labor Day weekend?
I drove to Kansas City and accomplished two things. I saw my son, who I haven't seen in a while, and who's a lawyer in Kansas. And I went to the Kansas City Irish Music Festival and discovered a couple of new artists that I'd been fans of before, but had never seen live. And so I had the opportunity to see them. 4.5 hour drive over, 4.5 hour drive back, but put on Spotify and it was fine. And I really enjoyed the festival.
On the highways, not a bad deal. You got the big highways there, so you can cruise back and forth.
We've got highways and we've got alternate routes. If something goes wrong,
right,
we've got an alternate way to get there.
You're not stuck. But of course, you went to Kansas City. The big question on everybody's mind, I'm sure, first thing that pops into my mind is, did you go have good barbecue while you were there?
First meal I had there.
First meal you had. Good barbecue, huh?
First meal. I walked into the festival and there was a barbecue tent from a favorite barbecue place, and I walked right over there and ordered a burnt ends sandwich. If you know what burnt ends are.
Oh, yeah.
and rocked out on that. And then the music came after all that. So, but first meal I had in Kansas City.
Man, satisfaction. I was speaking with somebody from Kansas City last week, an ad buyer or something in Kansas City. We got chatting about barbecue. I've never been there, but I've always wanted to go by there because it's like the crossroads of barbecue. You know, you get all different kinds of deep Southern barbecue to the other kinds that, the one I want to try that I've never tried. I saw it here a few years ago. It's like a mustard. It's not fully mustard, but it's like a mustard-based barbecue sauce where a big component of it is mustard. And I'm a huge fan of mustard, and I like barbecue. I'm hungry this morning, apparently, but that's the good one. Yeah.
There used to be a chain, and it may still exist in some places, called Red, White, and Hot Barbecue. I think was the name of Red, White, Blue, and Hot Barbecue, or something like that. And it had its great thing was it had all the different styles of barbecue. So you could order, Texas, or you could order Carolina, or you could order Tennessee, or you could order, all different types of barbecue, some of which were mustard based, a lot of which were tomato based, some of which you put coleslaw on the top, some of which you put pickles on the top. That was a favorite place for mine to stop.
That sounds delicious. Red, white, and blue hot barbecue. Okay. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. That sounds delicious. Barbecue is for breakfast, my friends. That's what it is. All right, we're going to jump back into it. Here we go. Number 2, Brad Keithley, the weekly top 3, the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Make sure you like and share this show, regardless of the platform you're on. Doesn't matter where you share it from. We'll get more folks involved. Let's get back to it. Here we go. All right, welcome back from the weekend, the big long holiday weekend. We hope you got refreshed and enjoyed yourself. We were all just talking about how we were all very slug-like this weekend and really did nothing. It was all fun, not productive, but fun and rejuvenative. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us. That's a great wake-up call for your new week. Tuesdays into the weekly top 3. We just finished up with number 1. Number 2 is the continual cry from peoples, including legislators, about how we are just bad people for not spending enough on education. This article, there's so many problems in this article. I want to talk about it. It's from Rebecca Himshoot. Brad, give us your details on it here.
Well, it's an op-ed that's in the ADN. Headline is Alaska schools are at the center of our communities and they're drastically underfunded. It is by Representative Rebecca Himshoot, who herself is a teacher. She took JKT's Jonathan Christ Tompkins' place in the legislature from Southeast, and it's one long paragraph. I mean, this must be 800 words, maybe. One long screed about we need more money in schools and how not doing that is failing children, failing families, failing Alaska, failing failing everything. But here's the thing that's not in it, and it's the thing I always look for. I go through these articles, I go through these op-eds, and I go, okay, representative, somebody who at least understands, who's supposed to understand responsibility, right? And they're going to tell me how much, they're going to tell me why we need to spend, and then they're going to tell me at the end. This is my fantasy world I live in, and then they're going to tell me in the end who pays, who's going to pay for all this additional money that they want. Not a word, not one word in the entire screed about who pays. It's just we need more, we need more, we need more, we need more, and we need more, and by the way, we need more, and it's and nothing about where this money is supposed to magically come from. And so in the silence, we know what that means, right? It means it comes from middle and lower income Alaska families. So
right.
through PFD cuts. So here's the message that really comes through from pieces like this. We need to spend more because Alaska families are in peril, Alaska kids are in peril, Alaska communities are in peril. We need to spend more, but we don't need to charge. But we don't need to charge everybody for it. We just need to take money from those least able to afford it middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts and let the top 20% non-residents ride free. That's the message that comes through from this. And frankly, that blows the message away from me. If somebody tells me they need more, fine. Okay, explain why you need more, but then tell me who's going to pay for it. And at least be fair and say, that everybody's going to contribute something toward it, and a fairly even amount or a fairly equitable amount toward it. And then I'll listen. But when you just tell me we need to spend more, we need to spend more, we need to spend more, and you don't address the elephant in the room, frankly, which is who's going to pay for all this additional spending, it wipes away the message for me. I mean, I just don't. It's hard to listen to it because they're not taking the responsibility to step up and say, and this is who's going to pay for it. So when you're left with the impression that everybody needs to benefit, everybody will benefit, sort of like childcare, right? The top 100, those earning 100,000 and more, they need childcare too. Everybody will benefit, but we want to do it in a way that only middle and lower income Alaska families pay for it. It's just it loses the message, and this is yet another example of that sort of approach out of legislators. This is a legislator who, by the way, refused to support Ben Carpenter's sales tax, which, while not perfect, nevertheless is a heck of a lot more equitable than PFD cuts. Refused to support Ben Carpenter's sales tax. And when push came to shove, when the budget came to the vote, last legislature voted to fund with PFD cuts, voted to fund on the backs of middle and lower income Alaska families. So, yeah, tell me how progressive you are. Tell me how enlightened you are. Tell me how, needful everything is. Tell me how you really got to work hard for Alaska families to make these additional spendings. Tell me all that, but your votes are telling me you don't believe that everybody contributes equally to these things. You believe that the cost ought to be shoved off on middle and lower income Alaska families, and you lose me at that point.
Right. Well, it's always some interesting things in this. It's always some half truths and innuendos wrapped up in here. Partway through, she says, "What's more, Alaskan educators don't receive a pension or Social Security." Well, they don't receive Social Security, but they do have the TERS system, which is the teachers' retirement system. They do have a retirement, but whether it's and I think what she's saying there is there's no defined benefits pension. It's a self-directed thing at tier 4. Not all of them are tier 4, obviously, but it's like these half truths that go through there and talk about this. And then later on, she goes and talks about the cost of Alaska spending, how it's more than many states, but you got to adjust. And once you adjust, we spend less than the average, the national average. We are spending more even in some of the main cities than they're spending in other states. This is not just a rural Alaskan problem.
Yeah. The defined contribution, defined benefit argument is always sort of humorous. I mean, during my career, I had defined contribution, right? I mean, I set money away as I went along into a 401k or to prepare for retirement, to have what I needed in retirement. I survived somehow. Other people, all of my cohorts through my career had 401ks as well in the law firms, and they survived. So it always, what the argument really is, they're saying, I don't want the risk of my retirement. I want the state to guarantee my retirement through a defined benefits program, that I will have a certain benefit and the state will guarantee that, even if the stock market, even if the investment market doesn't justify that return. I want that guaranteed, as opposed to, I'm a big boy. I can take the risk. I can assume I can make investments as well as the next guy. I can go, use some investment advisor, or I can go, pool my money into a fund and invest that way. That's what this is all about. They want government to guarantee. Those who argue for defined benefits want government to guarantee the outcome. They're not willing to take the risk themselves. And okay. There are people out there who did fine with defined contribution, and I can't get a whole lot of concern for people who want government to guarantee the outcome of their retirement, regardless of what the investment returns are.
Right. Well, no, it is frustrating for those of us who've had to make our own way and do our own thing with retirements over the years. I mean, it'd be nice if everybody got handed that whole defined benefits thing. But again, the costs, as we've seen across the nation, have been excruciating. I mean, it is, it's caused many companies to teeter on the edge of bankruptcy. They've had to be bailed out by the federal government. We've seen it time and time and time again. It's not a viable option, but they continue to sneak it in every discussion. I mean, this is a discussion about school spending, but there's your jab for defined benefits. That's going to cause it, and of course we know through some of the studies that it's not necessarily it's not the retirement and the benefits for these teachers to entice them there. That's not what's tripping them over. I mean, we need the governor's plan, which was submarined, would have created some bonuses and some other things, but they didn't want that. She pays lip service to it, but basically the bill went nowhere. So there are options to do things like that out there, but they don't really push for it when there is an option in front of them. It's all or nothing. It seems like it's all or nothing. That could be something that would be incremental, and yet she says, "Oh, that's great," but never supports it.
Yeah, it's government, give me a higher salary now, guarantee my retirement through a defined benefits program, immunize me essentially against the market that's affecting everybody else. Have government guarantee the outcome as opposed to riding the market like everybody else who's out on defined contributions, and pay me more now. But don't say who should be supplying all this additional money. Don't try to be equitable. You want to be equitable to the teachers. You want to be equitable pay. You want defined benefits. You want to be equitable retirement, but you don't want to be equitable on the incoming side. You don't want to be. You're not advocating being equitable on the revenue side. How we're going to pay for this, and it's just very frustrating. It's very one-sided. If good legislators are balanced, like Carpenter. I mean, Carpenter says, yes, we're going to spend. I recognize we're going to spend. We need to balance that with revenue flow. We need to recognize that there needs to be revenue flow to support that spending, as opposed to just taking it out through PFD taxes on middle and lower income Alaska families. We've got so that's responsible. I mean, that's covering both sides of it. But then we got the legislators like Rebecca here, who says spend, spend more, do more, government guarantee more, but without addressing the revenue flow, just assuming that we'll just take it more out of PFD cuts to cover the costs, and that's not balanced. I mean, that's very one-sided. She's more in this piece. She's more a lobbyist, more an industry booster than she is a state representative, a state legislator, or somebody who's trying to balance both sides.
That's number 2 of the weekly top 3. Give me a quick tease for number 3 coming up here.
ConocoPhillips made a statement about Willow that, frankly, has surprised some investors, surprised me, and makes me wonder exactly what's going on.
All right, we'll be back with more here in just a minute. Brad Keithley continues the weekly top 3. We'll return in just a moment. It is Tuesday. We'll continue with Brad right after this. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, our guest, as we continue to go through. Just going back here. So if a government guarantees a thing, if a government guarantee is a thing, why not go into the Social Security system? Yeah, I don't know the justification for removing teachers from Social Security back in the day. I just know that they do not participate in that system, and I think that was part of the trade-off with the PERS and TERS system. Maybe it's time to ask them to, for them to go back into the Social Security system. I mean, that just seems like that makes sense, Brad.
I think there's a problem with that, Michael. I looked at that at one point. I didn't exhaustively look at it, but I looked at it enough to figure out that the federal government won't let you do that. I mean, you have to have contributed to it. The whole system is based on contribution over life, right? Benefits are based on contribution over life. You can't just sort of halfway through say, oh, by the way, I want opt back in. And there's some significant issue as I came to understand it about getting back into the Social Security system. It would be difficult. It might be hugely costly in terms of catch-up payments. So it's not as easy as saying, okay, well, we opt out of the state retirement system. We want to go back to Social Security. You can't flip like that.
As individuals, I mean, if somebody quit the state, quit working for as a teacher, and went and got a job somewhere else, pushing brooms or something, I mean, they would be back in the Social Security system. But you're saying the system as a whole would have a hard time getting back into the Social Security system.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I've never really researched this. What was the justification originally? Did it have to do with the pensions, like the size of the pension, or what was it?
No, there was a choice. Again, I didn't research this exhaustively, but my appreciation of it was that there was a decision point at which you could either stay in Social Security or opt out of Social Security, and the state to avoid the employer share of the contribution to Social Security. Remember, Social Security has both an employee and an employer contribution. To avoid the employer share of the contribution, the state decided to set up its own retirement system, and so saved money from not contributing the employer share to Social Security, and had its own retirement system. So there was a decision made. I can't recall even the time frame, but there came a time at which you had to make it, at which states had the opportunity to opt in or opt out, and Alaska was one of the few, actually, but one of the opt out states.
Well, interesting. Again, that's a choice make. Going into that when you go to work, that's something that that goes on. I just got a message here. Every school district chooses whether or not to join Social Security. Both the district and the employees would contribute to that as well. All right. Let's see. We just finished up with that. We're going to go talk about. I guess I just posted this article back up in the chat room. If you guys want to read this from Rebecca Himshoot, again, this whole thing just feels more like a. This is what gets me. She goes on to talk in this article about how, schools provide community gyms and tsunami shelters, and there's spaces for the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and the Big Sisters and the meeting places. And I love how she's tagging all this together with what is constitutionally required, which is education for children. And then ties it all into, well, now the state should provide all these community buildings and shelters. And there are other options. Again, tying this all together like it's all part of the same mandate. It is, again, never a question of who pays for it. It is just how can we get more stuff, essentially, in the end.
Yeah, we need more and more and more of it, but yeah, don't worry about who pays for it. Don't worry about the impact. The same families that she's talking about that need all these things, she wants to take the money out of their pockets, increasingly out of because it's a regressive tax, increasingly out of the lower your income goes, the more as a percent you pay. All these people she wants to protect, she's the counterbalance is she's taking money out of their pockets to do it. She's not spreading the burden broadly across all Alaska families, non-residents, a little bit, some additional little bit from the oil companies. She's just concentrating by omission, by not talking about who pays, leaving the funding to come from additional PFD cuts. So she's taking money out of the hands of the very people, the most money out of the very hands of the people that she claims to be protecting.
Right, arguably. And that's a constant argument, right? I mean,
and so you wonder, is she protecting them or is she protecting something else? She's not really protecting the people because she's taking the money out of their pockets to pay for this stuff. So,
well, and that's a continuing argument from pretty much everybody who's the bigger pro-government side is, well, we got to protect these people by taking their PFD and spending it for them, which again is just another hint of the whole idea of we know better than you kind of thing that we've seen out there. All right, here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
That's right. Not your daddy's talk radio. We're a whole different breed of cat around here. Jumping into it, the weekly top 3 continues. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I know it's a heck of a way to start a week, but that's why we're going on here. The next one is a little bit of a surprise for many people who've been following this. This is the discussion on the Willow decision. That environmental statement and all the federal work that was done is now up in front of Superior Court Judge Sharon Gleason, and it's being asked by several environmental groups to overturn it. This is the second time it's been sent back to the drawing board. The first time they got sent back to the drawing board, and then they came back, and now this is the second time. But Conoco made an announcement here recently that surprised a lot of people, Brad.
Conoco has been fairly consistent throughout the entire Willow battle of being very patient and saying, look, Willow's a big project. It has a lot of moving parts, but it's a big reward. There's a lot of oil out there. We want the opportunity to go get that oil. We think we can do it economically. We think we can make money out of it, and we're going to keep the Willow project going. And most of the quarterly conferences they've had all of the quarterly conferences they've had with investment analysts where they've discussed Willow, that's sort of been the storyline. We're patient. We're going to wait through this. We know how to manage these projects. This risk is part of this environmental stuff is part of the risk you have when you go into Alaska. We've been in Alaska a long time. We know how to handle this stuff. We're going to work through it. In the latest set of court filings with Judge Gleason, though, they're changing their tune a little bit. And here, this is an article by James Brooks in the Alaska Beacon again. The headline is ConocoPhillips says court case is likely do or die for Willow Arctic oil project. And here's the first 2 paragraphs. In documents filed this week in Anchorage, international oil company ConocoPhillips said an ongoing federal court case is likely to make or break Alaska's largest planned oil development in decades. If Alaska District Court Judge Sharon Gleason cancels required federal approvals, quote, the Willow project is highly unlikely to proceed at all, close quote, said Connor Dunn, vice president of Willow for ConocoPhillips. That's the first time that Conoco's ever said the project is at risk. All the times before it's been, we can manage this. We know what we're doing. It's part of Alaska. We handle Alaska. We got it all done. Now they're telling the court the Willow project is highly unlikely to proceed at all. And part of this is the time frame that we're dealing with. The Willow is being developed on federal leases. Federal leases have a term, and you extend the term by having first production by a certain date. If you don't have first production by a certain date, then the lease expires. You have to take several steps along the way, but first production is one of those steps. And if you achieve first production, then the lease term is extended for as long as commercial production is achieved from the lease. But we're nearing that date. And essentially what ConocoPhillips is arguing is if we don't get these approvals, if Judge Gleason sends these approvals back for further work by the administration, then we're not going to have the approvals in hand in time to complete the construction and get first production underway by the time that we hit the lease term. Now, in most instances, if you're making good faith, I mean, I've dealt with these issues a lot in my career. In most instances, if you're dealing in good faith as you come up on with government, federal government in particular, as you come up on the end of the lease term, if there are things that have happened that aren't your fault, and you are dealing in good faith and trying to achieve that, the government will extend the lease term. I mean, it's not that lease terms can't be modified. They can be modified by the government, and they have been in a number of instances, a huge number of instances over the years across the country as you come up on the end, because the government doesn't want to lose they don't want to lose the productive value of that lease. They don't want to terminate the lease and either have to start the process all over again and have a significant delay, or just lose the prospect entirely. The government wants the revenue from the lease as badly as anybody else, so they will extend the lease term if it looks like you're going to make it. You're just not going to make it by a certain date. But what Conoco's saying is they're concerned. They're talking about terminating this because they're concerned that if the approvals aren't achieved, then they're not going to have first production by the lease date. And essentially what they're saying is, and maybe with good reason, that they don't trust whatever administration is in place at the time to extend the lease term if they come up to the end of that lease term and they haven't achieved first production by that date. More likely, a second reading of this is they're just frustrated. That they jumped through all the hoops during the Trump administration. They got approvals. Then the Biden administration came in, and the Biden administration said, "No, we got to go back and we got to redo certain stuff, and we got to get another set of approvals." And now we've gotten that second set of approvals, and now people are appealing that. And Conoco's just saying, "Look, if we're not going to get approval for what the Biden administration did, the Biden administration said, let's keep on going." The Biden administration looked at it, and the Biden administration gave these approvals with these conditions. If we're not going to get approval, given what the Biden administration did, we're never going to get approval on this sort of project, and so we're going to give up on it. Both those things are contributing to Conoco's position, but it's just a surprising position. It's just a surprising change, I think, in the position. As I and others perceive it, a change in their position that they've had all along of, we can handle these things. We're fine. Just be patient. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. What they've told investors. And now all of a sudden highly unlikely to proceed at all if they don't get these approvals approved by Judge Gleason. It's a concern.
Yeah, it is a concern. Willow is the cornerstone of future production here in the state. It's been held up as this is going to be the next phase of production on the North Slope, and this is what we need. What's your take on this? I mean, you followed what Gleason did in 2020 when she reversed that was the Trump administration's approval. Everybody was a bit surprised when the Biden administration passed it through and gave their approval as well after a period of time. What's your take on this? Do you have a feel for where Gleason may go on this, or what's your thoughts?
I think the likelihood is that Gleason approves the leases or the conditions that have been imposed on the leases. The Biden administration did a more thorough job than the Trump administration did. Admittedly, the Trump administration sort of tried to grease it through. Tried to grease it through with a minimal number of limitations. The Biden administration has been much more thorough. They've taken into account a number of additional things. I think there's enough there for Judge Gleason to approve it, and I think this becomes an interesting statement that Conoco made along the way, but not one that becomes effective. But you never can tell. Judges are interesting people. They sometimes find legal issues find issues fascinating that others don't. They sometimes, want to hold the government to account to do everything that the government's supposed to do. Judge Gleason's been a very thorough judge. She's been a very fair judge, I think. Some don't. Some think she's biased, but I think she's been a very fair judge, and I think that approval here is highly likely. But it may not. She may send it back, and And Conoco's warning is something to take seriously. You don't make these comments in court filings lightly, because investors and others see them and react to them, and you don't want to mislead a court, because that'll come back to bite you. You don't want to threaten a court, and this sort of comes across in a way as a threat. So it's just a very interesting statement, and one that I think is certainly important for us to consider and us to keep in mind as we follow along the progress of the case. Judge Gleason has said that she'll rule by November. She set up a schedule that will put her in a position to rule by November, in order to let Conoco proceed with the winter construction, to gear up and do the winter construction, if she approves the permit. So we're going to know sooner rather than later. This is not one of those that's going to drag out for a long period of time. And it's not one that Conoco said, if we lose this on appeal, if Judge Gleason rules against us and we lose it on appeal, then we're going to consider undoing. I mean, they're saying basically that the district court judge is going to decide whether this project goes forward. So
right.
It's a big issue.
What does this say to future production? I mean, let's just say theoretically the judge comes back and denies it. What does this say to Alaskan production in the future?
Well, it says at least on federal lands, boys and women, you're going to have a hard time going forward on federal lands. Anwar is already dead, but it's going to say Anwar, you're dead again. NPRA, you're just going to have a hard time going forward. And any other federal lands, NPRA is the big one. But if somebody has a discovery in the offshore waters that affects federal waters, then it'll affect that. It's going to say on federal lands, you're sort of wasting your time. You won't say that. It won't say that about state lands. It won't say that about the Pica project. But on federal lands, it'll say you're sort of wasting your time anymore.
Frustrating stuff. We'll have to see what comes out of that. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, thanks for coming on board and sharing your thoughts with us today. As always, we appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got more coming up. Hour 2 is dead ahead. If you would like, you can always join us in the chat room, which is available right now over on Facebook or on YouTube, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show /live, if you would like to be part of it there. Hour 2 continues. Chris Story is going to be our guest. Do a little recap and then come back with more right after this. What struck me most about this, Brad, was I hadn't realized until I was going back and doing some reading on this and looking at it and realized this lease, again, is a 30-year. I mean, here we are. It's a 30-year lease, and we're just coming down to the wire here on 30 years to try and get this project off the ground. I mean, the time frames on these things are so, the details on them are so long. I mean, if you get started now, it's another 30 years. I mean, if that's the case, if that's the way that it works, if you had to start from scratch again, what company is going to look at that and then look at the money? They spent $900 and something million in the last year or so alone, and they're expected to spend more in the coming year. But I mean, how much money has been poured into this hole that if it goes sideways, 30 years. I mean, the length of these things is what blows my mind.
Well, this project hasn't been in development for 30 years. I mean, what you do with leases, what companies do with leases is they sort of identify a region that they're interested in. And there's no reason to spend money in that area unless you got leases, land access. So you sort of stockpile the leases. And then you sort of sort through over time, you sort through those with the best objective. You stockpile the leases at the time the leases come up for sale because you don't want somebody else to buy the lease. If you think this area might be productive, you go and get the lease. But you've got other projects that you've been working on or nearer in time that you've spent more on. You're trying to bring to fruition, and so you got this lease sort of sitting out there. These leases sort of sitting out there. This project sort of sitting out there that you'll get to in due course. So that's what's happened with Willow. I mean, you go through the exploration phase of doing seismic and doing exploration drilling and then analyzing the exploration drilling, then doing more exploration drilling. Because if you find something, you want to make sure you got enough of something there to justify the economics of doing it. So it's been a fairly long process that they've gone through to get to this stage. It's not that they've been at it for 30 years and they've spent 30 years just sort of flailing along trying to get there. It's been only the last few years that they've been in significant development activities with respect to this project. But you do come up at the end. I mean, you do at some time it does run out, and you need to be in first production by the time you hit the end of it.
Well, it's interesting to see, again, all the effort and time and energy that's been poured into this. And the fact, again, that, I mean, it was surprising. The Biden administration actually took a bunch of heat for approving the Willow project. And so you'd think that, with that kind of approval, that it would be kind of a slam dunk. But I guess we'll have to see where it goes there.
Well, courts aren't supposed to bend to political whims. So the fact that, it's the thoroughness, I think, that the Biden administration put in on the review that will be determinative. It's not merely the fact that the Biden administration of all administrations was the one that sided with it. It's the thoroughness that the Biden administration put into it, and I think the Biden administration did put a lot of effort into it. In some ways, Trump did the industry a disservice. Trump, by rocket docketing these projects and getting them through with the skimpiest of reviews, he sort of set them up for court review and court rejection.
Right.
And in a way, sort of did the industry a disservice by what he did. The Biden administration has done it much more thoroughly, and I think is much more ready for court review than the Trump administration did. So hopefully that will pay off. I mean, if what the Biden administration didn't do isn't good enough, nobody's going to be renewing these leases, and nobody's going to be looking for additional leases out there. We may have some people still trying to pursue leases that they already have in hand, but it's going to be tough to justify. If Conoco gives up on this, it's going to be tough to justify to other investors why you're spending money on a project that even Conoco in Alaska, with all of its Alaska reputation, couldn't get done. It's investors are going to be very skeptical of somebody who says I can do it, but Conoco couldn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, fast tracking it didn't do them any favors, I guess, and that's the kind of the amorphousness of one administration to the other as the position changes hands. Things that they spend the first year undoing everything that their predecessor did that they didn't like, so it didn't really do them any favors in fast tracking all that stuff, but. I guess we'll see what that means. And of course, as you said, it doesn't mean anything for like Pica. That doesn't affect state lands, but there's still some significant opportunities out there, for other projects on the federal lands if this goes through. If not, like you said, it takes a whole swath of properties off the table.
Yeah, Conoco's identified additional opportunities beyond Willow. I mean, that's one of the reasons that the environmental community is so focused in on Willow, because they see that as a step toward additional development on federal land. So there are additional opportunities out there. This is sort of an additional Alpine, I think, was the first, but this is sort of additional steps out into NPRA that you want to see the industry pursuing. But
yeah,
if Conoco gives up, it's going to be hard to convince anybody else that they somehow can do it better.
Well, I think that's why they're fighting so hard right now, is because they don't want any it's all lock it all up. They don't want to develop any of that federal land. And so they see the opportunity to stop it in its tracks if they can. Fingers crossed that it doesn't come down to that. All right, Brad, I know it's early in the week and it's been the weekend and everything else. What are you looking at for this next week quickly here?
Well, I started working on the column this week is going to be on inflation proofing. The Permanent Fund Corporation issued its most recent July financial statements, and really is doing some, to me, weird stuff in the earnings reserve account. So, and it's tied to inflation proofing. So I'm focusing a lot on inflation proofing this coming week.
All right. Well, we'll see what that brings next week. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Enjoy the barbecue. I hope you go back. 8 hours for good barbecue. It's a thing. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it. All right, folks, we are out of time. Liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out themichaeldukesshow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome back to it, the Tuesday edition of the Michael Dukes Show. After the weekend, post Labor Day weekend, is summer officially over? I mean, I gotta know. It was 40. It's up to 48 degrees now here at the old radio ranch, but it was, of course, it was a little cooler. Oh no, it just dropped down back to 40. Never mind. It's great. It's okay. You're fine. Anyway, I hope you got a lot done around your. I hope you got a lot done around your house and around your yard. Got all your winter stuff done. I did absolutely well. I mowed the lawn and picked up a few things and got a little stuff squared away, but I'm not ready yet. I am not ready yet for the 41 in Anchor Point this morning. And then somebody in Fairbanks was asking this morning if anybody else got frost or something. So apparently it's cooling off quickly up in Fairbanks right now. But okay, it's, I winter is coming. That's just, it's about the only thing I can say right now. Death, taxes, and winter. They're the only sure things that we're going to have laid out in front of us here in the coming time. All right. So hour 2 of the program, we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We may do a little bit of a recap on some of those things, but coming up at the bottom of the hour, Chris Story is going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about, I don't know, we're going to talk about something. He's going to have a life coaching lesson for us of some kind. So looking forward to seeing what he brings to the discussion on that here this morning. We'll see what he has to say in just a few moments and give us that weekly uplift, which we usually need after sitting down with Brad and going over all the stuff with Brad. Oh man. So what did you do this weekend? Did you actually work? I mean, I think all of us in the chat room were commiserating about how we were all I guess we were all slugs. I did very little this weekend. Like I said, I got the grass mowed, which was a big thing because, you just never know when it's going to be that final day of summer to be able to get it done. It may be my last grass mowing season of the year. I'm just not sure. And then, but I really did very, very little else. And it felt good. It felt good to just kind of relax. I actually turned my phone off on Friday afternoon, Friday evening. I just said, you know what? And I just turned it off and I put it on my nightstand and I turned it back on late yesterday, when I was getting ready for bed because I use my phone to wake me up. And so I'm like, okay, I got to turn this on. And yeah, I had a few badings as my messages came through, but it was nice just to kind of be not just out of touch, just unreachable. And it kind of feels good. You guys, may I suggest that as a weekend therapy, that you just turn your phone off for the weekend. And I mean, unless you're out and about with people and you need to be but I mean, for the most part, just turn it off and put it down. And you know what? You'll live, you'll survive. I mean, how did we survive without instant communication all the time with everybody? I don't know. We made it. We did it through. We didn't need to be somebody would call and leave us a message, or we'd call them back, or something would happen and we'd discover it. It wasn't like knowing it immediately really affected us in many ways. So might I suggest that as kind of therapy, just to kind of turn it off and just enjoy the peace and quiet, I guess, for a little bit. I haven't done that in a long time, and it was definitely worth it this weekend to do that. So I felt pretty good about a little guilty last night when I turned it back on and there was a bunch of messages, but you know what? I can't, I don't know. I just can't complain. I can't complain about it. All right. What else is going on? Barbara announces that tonight it is election season up in the interior. The borough assembly and the school boards and everybody else have got their elections coming up in October. And so she wanted to remind us that if you're up in the Interior Taxpayers Association has a borough candidate forum tonight at the University Baptist Church in Fairbanks at 6:30 p.m. So if you want to see your borough candidates and get a chance to differentiate between the various candidates, again tonight 6:30 at the University Baptist Church in Fairbanks, that's the place to go. ITA always puts on a good forum, and it's always interesting to watch, to see the differences between them. And of course, ITA has been fighting hard for many years to try and limit the size and scope of government. So a great organization there. I recommend it. Go out there and check it out tonight at 6:30. And then, of course, don't forget to go out and vote. We saw a swing in the interior here over the last couple of years, and we need to try and maintain that balance on the borough assembly, since it went so far afield from when I watched the borough assembly in Fairbanks just kind of, from when I first joined to where it had a handful of members who were what you would consider to be kind of more conservative, to basically there was just two voices on there, me and one other guy, and that was about it. And so it's good to see you got to go out there and support those candidates, though. Got to go support those candidates and just kind of keep that balance going. It's gonna be necessary. All right, what else is on the? Speaking of Fairbanks, I just saw this, and I think it spells. I think this is just indicative, not just of Fairbanks, but kind of the whole publishing industry in general. Must Read Alaska is reporting that the Fairbanks Daily News Miner has eliminated its Saturday edition and moved that and combined it with the Sunday edition. It's a weekend edition now, published on Sundays. The newspaper is the latest to reduce its newsprint edition. It remains the second largest newspaper in Alaska after the ADN, the Anchorage Daily News, and is the farthest north daily newspaper in America. This is happening across the country. Consolidation, reductions, because more and more people are moving away from print media. That's just kind of that's the way the technologies have pushed things to where, speaking of instantaneous, right? We were talking about having your phone with all that instantaneous communication and turning it off during the weekend. Well, your phone provides you with instant access to news kind of just the second it happens. So it's not surprising that a newspaper that prints on a once-a-day basis is going to be a little bit behind the power curve. I mean, how many times have we seen articles in the paper that we've known about for, 24 to 36 hours because we have the little computer in our hands? And so this is not really surprising. They report that the newspaper was down in revenues almost $1 million in 2020, down from 2019. Now, part of that probably had to do with COVID. No more recent numbers, but the Juneau Empire, which was the third largest paper, moved to a Wednesday and Saturday print edition only, and the ADN ceased printing a Saturday edition several years ago. And then the Anchorage Press, which was kind of more of one of the, one of more progressive kind of alt papers out there, they stopped printing altogether earlier this year. It's not an industry where you can make a ton of money. It's a full fundamental change and a shift, and we've got to adapt to that. We've been seeing this for years. Newsprint has been on the decline. Printed newspapers have been on the decline for years. That's why you've seen so many of them move more towards the digital advertising and digital revenue and everything else, because most businesses aren't paying for advertising in the newspaper anymore. And that's where the subscription revenue is a very small component of what they're doing. This is not surprising. I would not be surprised if the Fairbanks Daily News Miner and the Kodiak Mirror, they're actually owned by the same, but they're all part of the same umbrella thing. I would not be surprised if they move to a same kind of thing that the Juneau Empire did, to a Wednesday, Saturday, or Wednesday, Sunday, maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing. It would not surprise me because of the costs involved in that, and the fact that the ones who really are the heart of the buying public for newspapers are that older generation who grew up with it. They're not, but now we've got a whole new generation of people who grew up with computers and phones and tablets and everything else, and so they are not married to that whole I guess methodology of getting news out there, the whole print thing, and so it's a diminishing fan base for print, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes here in the future. The other news was that the Board of Education has voted to limit the participation of trans girls in high school sports, much to the chagrin of many different entities out there. And we could talk about that here on the other side when we get done with Chris' story. It's interesting, some of the commentary that we've seen in regards to this, most specifically from the student representative who is on the board, Felix Myers. I want to talk just a little bit about that, but we're going to wait for that here in just a moment. Right now, we're going to go back, take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have our weekly uplift from Chris Story, the man from Homer, who comes in to give us a little weekly betterment segment, positivity boost. We'll do that here in just a second. Back with more of The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, let's see if we can get Chris lined up for our discussions and see what is going on here. We'll get Chris going on. Okay, we got that real quick. Let me Let me give Grizz a call. Let me give him a shout here and see what he has to say. See if we can get this to connect properly on this beautiful Monday/Tuesday. Hey, look at that. It actually works.
Good morning. Of course it works.
Of course it works. You turn it on, you turn it off. Of course it works. How are you, my friend? How was your Labor Day weekend?
Wonderful. Uneventful as it ought to be, and just beautiful. We've got some amazing weather happening here on top of the world.
Oh, really? Is it nice and bright and sunshiny, or is it cold and clear,
yes.
or what is it?
It's beautiful. Cold, yeah, clear, and just that fall crisp feeling in the air, and it's just beautiful.
Well, good. I'm glad you're enjoying a little bit of on top of the world weather down there. It's continued to rain here like a big dog. Although
Was
I will
the
say,
fair over?
the fair's over. I believe the fair. This was the last weekend for the fair. To which
the weather will improve shortly.
Yeah, the weather will improve. Yeah, it actually got pretty nice on Sunday for a bit, and then yesterday it was pretty nice all day. Like I said, it actually dried the grass out enough that I could go out and mow it. So I felt pretty good about that. Do you have people to do that for you, or do you do all your own mowing these days?
My house, I mow my own house, and I love it. It's an art. It's an art form for me. I love it. It's in therapy. It's therapeutic. Yeah, I enjoy it. I use electric or battery operated equipment, Michael, because I'm saving the planet.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I've seen that there's been a lot more. There's been such an improvement in that stuff over the last few years that a lot of people are going to that. One of my friends who's not doing it for the environmental reasons, but doing it simply for the ease and convenience and the fact that he has to haul his mower up a set of steps. He's like, this is nicer because it's lighter and I can still get everything done and it's quiet and boom, it's all good.
We were having a little gathering last evening and we were out on our deck and the mower, the neighbor 2 doors down was mowing. Couldn't hear it. Battery operated. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing thing. I do find a bit of zen in doing the lawnmower. I don't know if it's as good as a segment with Chris Story on the radio, but it's not bad. I mean, you get there and you just kind of do the lazy track. Now, do you do the cross hatching? Do you go back and forth across, 90-degree turns?
Yeah, if I'm going to mow twice, and that's the beauty of a small lawn, you can mow it twice in 30 minutes. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, if need be. But yeah, I like the pattern developed and all that. Yeah, always have. Since I was a kid, I grew up with 3.5, almost 4 acres of lawn adjoined with my grandparents' 5 acres adjoined with their 80 acres of field. And so mowing was something my grandfather and I, it was like my job all summer with him growing up as a kid. So I found it very relaxing and he and I had a great time. So every time I'm mowing, I think about him.
Yeah, I just remember when I was a kid growing up, we used to mow. We had a small segment of grass outside the house, and it wasn't very big, but my mom and dad, they were like, no, this will build character, and they gave me a push mower. And a
real mower?
Yeah, a real mower, a push mower, non-motorized push mower. And, of course, this patch of lawn was uphill and downhill at a pretty significant grade. So it was always like, oh, you just hated that. I don't know, but anyway, it is kind of zen now. I get that. All right, so what's our topic for today, Chris? What are we going to be talking about?
Are you or aren't you?
Are me or aren't me? Okay, all right. I'll figure that out. We'll see what they have to say. All right. I'll put you back on hold here. We'll be right back to you. We're 30 seconds out. That's what the ding means. So we're going to jump back into this, folks. Like and share. Like and follow. If you're watching it on YouTube, and I know there's a chunk of you watching it on YouTube, would you subscribe and ring the bell? Say hello. Share it with friends and family and coworkers and everybody else. Let's get more people involved in this conversation. This is our Betterment segment with the Baron of Betterment, Chris Story, the guru of positivity. It's fun stuff. All right, the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's get to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
Yep, that's me, the one with the show. That's why they call it the Michael Duke Show. It is Tuesday. We're at the bottom of the hour 2. Chris Story is our guest today. He is the guru of positive. I mean, he's everything, right? He's a realtor of renown. He's a potter of perfection. He is a public speaker. He is a radio show host. And he is the guru of positivity, the baron of betterment, the guy with the plan for your life. And he joins us, just he and his dog this morning. I just heard his dog snore. He's just snoring away in the background. Chris Story joins us this morning to talk about will you or won't, will me? What was it? I'm sorry, I've already forgotten it. That was how long ago it was. I've already forgotten it.
That's how impactful it was.
Well, your dog is snoring. I mean, you're keeping me awake at least. Oh, will you or won't you? Are you or aren't you? Right?
Yes, exactly. And that's Reagan making his radio debut in the background there. And he's a King Charles Cavalier Spaniel, and he is named Reagan after, of course, the greatest president of my lifetime. And Ronald and Nancy, whilst in the White House, had King Charles. They had 2 King Charles Cavalier Spaniels, and one looked just like our little guy here, so we had to name him Reagan.
And he snores just like Reagan did, so it's all good.
All the way through cabinet meeting. That was one of my favorite jokes. Reagan said, at any time of crises or whatever, I've been told to have my staff wake me up, even if it's in the middle of a cabinet meeting.
Exactly. I loved his sense of humor was so good. All right, Chris. Well, will we or won't we? Give us a rundown here. What are we talking about for our betterment segment?
Well, it's actually, are you or aren't you? In other words, I think we have this sense of life that some people are. I'll tell you what inspired me. I'll give you the background. A guy called Rick Rubin has produced probably almost every piece of music you like, from rap to Adele to name a star, name a performer, name some genre of music. Rick Rubin's had his fingers at the pulse of it for probably 35, almost 40 years. And he wrote a book about creativity. And so I had to get that book because I admire his work, not necessarily all the music, but I admire his work in the industry because he works in a very Zen, like almost like a Buddhist monk kind of fashion. And it's really unusual. And I thought, well, I want to see inside his mind. The best way to do that is to get his book. And he talks about creativity in a way that you have access to. Everybody has access to creativity. Everybody is creative, whether or not you tap into it. So my question then became, well, are you or aren't you? Not are you creative or aren't you? Are you practicing creativity or aren't you? Because you have that opportunity. We talk about doctors, attorneys, real estate practice. We talk about engineering practice. We talk about all these practices as a profession,
right?
Because they're continually practicing. They're always doing the work. And so if you're an artist, let's say you're a painter and you're not painting, why not? Why aren't you doing it? Or if you've always wanted to, if you've always wanted to write, because I've published 4 books now, I do hear from a lot of people that say, oh, I've always wanted to write, or I want to write a book. And it's like, well, do it. You can do it. Nobody in this day and age, you do not need permission handed from on high. There is sort of this democratization of all things creative, and there's nothing holding you back. I'll give you an example. You were talking about newspapers in your previous segment. And the reason newspapers are dying isn't because people aren't reading news, isn't because people don't want things delivered. It's what they're writing. It's what they're publishing. So a friend of mine was commonly writing to the Homer News, which is owned by the Peninsula Clarion, which I think might own the Empire, whatever.
Right.
And one of the editorial board retired, and then they would no longer publish Greg's work. Well, why not? Well, Greg's a conservative, and you have to know that almost every single newspaper besides the Epoch Times is going to be leaning left. And they just stopped publishing his work. Well, Greg could have stopped his creative practice. He could have stopped writing. He could have stopped exercising his voice, but instead said, I'll start a Substack. So we've got Seward Follies. In fact, he's going to be a guest on my show today. And my number one question is, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are starting your own imprint, your own newspaper in this digital age?
Right.
So it isn't that we don't want things. I mean, physical book sales are on the rise. Bookstores are having a moment in time. They're coming back, a resurgence, a renaissance, if you will, not because people are reading less or digital has ruined it. And it isn't that and I agree with you that the computer in your hand does make the immediacy of news like boom, it's right here in your hand. But how it's written about by clever writers and people that think things through in editorials, that's still in demand. It's just they are seeing one side of the prism and they're excluding another side, which happens to be the majority people in the state, which is why the Fairbanks papers and others are having trouble. Think about this. Radio is a dying industry. Oh, that's right. Just ask people that are nationally syndicated. Ask Michael Dukes, who's statewide syndicated. It's dying, all right. And people are dying to hear what you've got to say, hear your opinions, and hear your guests and your creative way you approach this medium. So it's really about how you do something, not what you do.
Right.
And if you're holding yourself back because you don't feel like you're creative or accomplished, I suggest you are, and either you are doing it or you aren't. But that's your call. It's
Right.
not us. What we think of your work is none of your business.
Well, and I think it's how you do it as well. I think you're right. I think part of the problem with, like, for example, the print media is that it has become skewed in some way, but also the delivery method and people's expectations have changed, right? So you've got to adapt with the times. You've got to. It's not just the print edition is bad because of the editorials and things like that and the slant to it. It's because people now are expecting news on the moment. They're expecting to hear about something that happened across the country within the hour. And when you expect to hear about it in the hour and it doesn't get printed in a newspaper until 24 hours or 36 hours later, that's also part of it. You've got to adapt. You've got to learn to do that, to be creative in how you deliver things.
And just talking to the regular Joe, the regular person, I think there's this notion that we need, like, for example, I am getting ready to do a series of paintings. What? Who are you? You're not a painter.
Right.
No, I'm going to. And
Okay,
these
Van
paintings have
Gogh.
been living.
Okay, Van Gogh. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not going to cut my ear. And if I do, it's just because I was, got a little wild with the razor. I promise you, I'm going to cut my ear off. But this idea that I'm just going to do it because these paintings have been living in my mind, and it's like I have to get them out of my mind onto the canvas. And once I'm done with this series, yeah, I'm going to be asking a gallerist to show them, but not because I think, I'm going to compete with people that have actual talent. I recognize the difference. I just need to get these paintings out of my head. I know what I'm going to do with them. It's going to be something that is one and done. It's a project. I see the project in my mind. I'm going to go do it. I'm not waiting for permission. I'm not waiting for somebody to pick me. I'm not waiting for an art instructor to go, man, you've got some talent. No, I don't. I've got an idea and I've got to get it out of my head and onto the canvas. And then I'm going to let it go into the world. And if people don't like them or don't care I'm not doing it for you. I'm going to do this practice for me. So your opinion of my work isn't any of my business. And that's my message. Are you or aren't you? What is it you want to do? You've always wanted to start a business? Well, get busy doing it. Build it. Read a book or two, but then get busy and go do it. Do the work. You've always wanted to invest in real estate. You've always wanted to write a book or be a painter, or you've wanted to become a licensed massage therapist. It's right there in front of you. Are you or aren't you? Because it's up to you.
Chris Story is our guest, the man from Homer. You could find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. So are you or aren't you? You're saying basically, Chris, that everybody has that spark of creativity. They have something in them, but a lot of people will go, well, I'm not that creative. I don't do art. I'm not a writer or a speaker or I'm a performer. What do you say to people like that? I mean, how does somebody, if they feel like they don't have anything to offer, that they don't have anything that's creative, how do we go about finding that creative spark inside of us? What, in your mind, what would be the steps that we would take? Again, breaking it down to basics for folks here. What would you do to try and tell folks who say something like that? What would you say to them?
I would say that if you just take a really good listen, take a walk in the woods, go somewhere quiet, go to the beach alone, no headphones, no phone, nobody, and just listen. We know, there is something you want to do. And I'm not sure if I'm talking to you or I'm talking to you, but you know it. There's something you've wanted to do. And so often we're waiting to be picked. Often we're waiting for permission or waiting for enough of the accreditation, whatever it is that we think the world will then bestow upon us, the path or opportunity towards something. When in reality, it's the path, it's the journey, it's the doing, it's the action, it's the practice, getting started and moving into and through this creative through line that will create the joy, not the final product. And I'm telling you this art project that I have in mind, not because, I want to sell you a painting, but because I want to sell you on the idea that I'm enjoying this process, which is the thinking and the creation in the mind. Stephen Covey said everything's created twice, once in the mind and then in the world. And so I'm enjoying this aspect of it just as much as I probably will the physical creation and painting, and then facing potential rejection from gallery owners and then patrons. And I'm going to enjoy it all the way through. And it's a real joy, and nobody's picking me. I'm picking me, myself. And I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to do this.
Well, it's interesting you say you look forward to the rejections, because I've talked to plenty of people who I've actually read some of their, like, they say, well, I want to write. I want to write. And I'm like, okay, so let me see what, and they send me a snippet or whatever. And I'm like, this is really good. And they're like, yeah, but I just couldn't take the criticism or rejection of people. So I really can't go forward. And that just breaks my heart, because somebody may be touched by what you're writing or performing or painting or whatever it is. And it's, I think people let that fear of criticism, fear of rejection, they let them hold it lets them hold them back, right? Instead of just kind of throwing the paint out there and let it fall where it may, kind of thing. Like you said, embracing the idea that people may criticize you or whatever. I know it's a hard thing to do. I know it's easy for me to say, oh, just reject the crit. I mean, if I get critiqued on something, I do get a little tense about it sometimes, but it's the only way we learn to adapt, right? It's the only way we learn to improve. And so at some point, it's got to be part of the process.
Yeah, I agree. And you can use that criticism as fuel. At the same time, you can use it as an opportunity to sharpen the saw and go, are they right? Is there something here? Could I have done something different or better? If the answer is no, then move on. It's none of your business. What they think of you is none of your business, unless, of course, you're going blindly into the middle of a storm and don't recognize it. You were talking earlier about the immediacy of news and how we want immediacy. We really do. I'll tell you one thing, though. I was pretty moved by Jimmy Buffett's passing. It was like, that was like a gut punch. And I really stopped and thought about that a lot. And I was talking to a friend, and he was mentioning how it really took him back. And I was like, it's interesting that he, I don't know him, never knew him. I can name 2 songs that he did, but I've admired him, and he's been a part of my life since I can possibly remember.
Right.
And so anyway, I guess my point is 2 things. One, his creativity always made you feel good. I mean, that's what he was about, was making you feel good. It wasn't about him. It was about making you feel good. That's number 1. Number 2, I couldn't wait to read a newsletter that I subscribed to for radio hosts and people on the inside of the baseball. And there was a newsletter coming out, and it was going to feature an article on Jimmy Buffett. And I couldn't wait to read it, even though it was 3.5 days after he had passed. So I guess my point is, when you're practicing something that people want, or you put something into the world that is going to make other people feel good, there's always an audience. And there's always people out there for you, even though Jimmy Buffett, for example, wasn't for everybody, but he was for millions of people.
Right.
And this newsletter wasn't immediate, but I couldn't wait to read their take on his life and sort of a summation of all of that. So anyway, I guess I'm making 2 points at once. I'm just really hoping the major point is that I hope you take a chance on yourself. I'm really glad you did, Michael, because nobody picked you to go on air. You picked yourself, and you said, you know what, my opinions, you're going to hear them. I'm going to tell you, and not everybody likes your opinions.
That's the fact. That's the fact.
I mean, you read your wife's newsletter, right?
Yeah, I do. It's horrible. I mean, it's horrific what happens there. But yeah, you're right. You've got to find something, and I've found different creative outlets. Some are public and some are not. I mean, I talked about it a couple of years ago. I mean, I started doing like little dioramas and miniature painting and things like that. And it wasn't because I wanted to post them out on the internet and say, look at how great I am. It was just a creative outlet for something. And you're right. I enjoyed every process of planning it and printing the pieces and then painting them and deciding how things are going. And, it was just, again, part of that process that I found joy in the process. I mean, it was nice to see it finish, but I did several big projects and I gave them away to people who I thought would appreciate them and enjoy them. I don't even have them anymore. All I have is fond memories and pictures, and to me, that was cool. That was cool because the process is what I found enjoyable. And I think we miss that no matter what the creative thing is that the process, sometimes painful, sometimes rushed, sometimes stress filled because you're on a deadline or whatever. But when it's all said and done, you look back and you go, oh, that was good. That was the process was just as good as the destination because of what it made us feel during that time.
So I guess the message is there's no sense in saying you're not good at something if you're not practicing it. So get busy.
Well, you got to practice. It's a craft. Many things are a craft, not a profession, because a craft you have to continue to work at, right? You have to continue to sharpen the sword, so to speak, on those things. And it's interesting stuff. Chris, folks can find you at ilovehomeralaska.com. You've got your radio show, your podcast, you're syndicating your radio show as well. You've got books. You're a Renaissance kind of dude.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and ilovehomeralaska.com is sort of the repository for everything I do. And by the way, I just talked to somebody the other day who listened to The Watchmen, a bit of a self-promotion here, but really it's about you because they didn't mention the writing. They mentioned the performance on Audible, how much they loved it, and it creeped them out. And anyway, but that's on you. Thank you, Michael.
Well, it's only your words, my friend. Without those words, I couldn't bring it to life. It needs to be good stuff. So I appreciate that. Again, you can find him at I Love Homer Alaska. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you, my friend. As always, it's great to speak with you. Thank you for being part of it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hold the line, Chris, for just a second. All right, folks, we got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show, one final segment. We'll be back with more right after this. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break real quick. Chris Story is our guest. I was just bringing it up, Chris, this thought that I was having, and we actually had it last week because it was right after you got off the segment, you hung up, and I was like, we should move this segment to be the final segment of the show to leave people on a high note, because the problem is about 80% of the time, Brad has been on the program and he's brought up a topic, or I've come up with some kind of topic at the top of the second hour, and I've worked myself up into a little bit of a frenzy or whatever. I'm a little agitated. And then we get you come on and you are like soothe the savage beast. And I'm like, oh, I feel so good. And then that last segment is such a hot mess because now I'm like, I was all worked up and I could go back to that, but I just don't feel like being worked up because now I'm caught. It's like
in between.
I know, it's like getting that good massage where you're all relaxed and you're like, well, now I just don't want to do anything but take a nap kind of thing. It's like I need that fun. So think about that. Maybe in the future, if you're amenable, maybe we put you into the final segment instead of that middle segment so that we can finish up on a positive instead of having this positivity segment and then kind of wandering in the wilderness for that last segment kind of thing. But I do want to bring you on more often to talk about, to get your take on things. You and I had a discussion here over I guess it was late last week. We were talking back and forth about Donald Trump so you were criticized. You said I was harshing on Trump or whatever, and then we were talking about who was going to be what. Anyway, I think it's an interesting take. I mean, you and I don't agree on everything, and And I think that I think it would be good to have a little counterpoint sometimes on some of those things, and things that you and I do agree on, like the uselessness of our senators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. That's wonderful. Thank you. And moving to the final segment, that's absolutely fine. It's your call, and I'm totally amenable and available wherever you tell me to be ready. Yeah, but just thinking back about, can you imagine if media, talk radio, were left into the hands of Air America? You remember how Air America failed? I mean, just
they failed.
grotesquely.
Yeah, they failed miserably. I remember we were talking about, that was back in the day. We were in Fairbanks. We were talking about, do we bring this on as a counterpoint? Do we try and, because we wanted to try and be balanced and reach out to every segment of the audience. And so we were watching it, and we were like, okay, we'll give it a little time to see. And it imploded like within a year. Yeah, within a year, the whole thing basically came unstuck. And it was like, okay. So we never did bring any of the programming on, but you could see.
Just imagine if radio would be dead. I mean, if Rush Limbaugh wasn't who he was and didn't resonate with the entire country back in 1988 and 89 when he began his network show, if it left to just Al Franken, there wouldn't be talk radio. AM radio wouldn't have been saved, and the stations would have continued to implode just like newspapers are. And so that's kind of interesting. If there was somebody brave enough with a local paper, like, for example, Homer News became for 2 years just a COVID watch, COVID death count, COVID hospitalization count. That was the sole reason for their existence for years. And now it's nothing. I mean, if they were brave enough to actually have a dual track where people like Greg and people, conservative voices and conservative takes, people would go back to reading them and actually looking forward to getting the paper in mass versus just the hangers-oners who are going to eventually dissipate and it's a dying breed, not because of the business model, but because of the way they're using it. That's my contention. And I think anytime you've seen radio do that, other than NPR continues to
dominate,
continues to grow, but they do, but they've also changed the way that they approach it. So it's just interesting. Newspapers, if there was one Alaskan newspaper brave enough to take on an actual, sort of like Lady Justice and be blind and just say, you know what, we're going to have the conservatives and we're going to have the liberal point of view, I think they would prosper and thrive.
I would agree. We definitely would have a lot larger readership if there was even the appearance of a non-biased kind of thing like that. But radio is interesting because radio, even during the pandemic, everybody says, well, radio's dead. But radio provided 94% of Americans tuned into radio all during the pandemic and then beyond. And people spend something like 47 minutes an hour or 47 minutes a day listening to radio, the average person. 47 minutes. That's a big chunk of your day. People are still listening to radio. It's not going anywhere. It has the immediacy. It has the locality of being, hyper local. It can be tuned hyper local. And I think that's what people want. And quite honestly, I believe, I'm passionate about that. I believe that's important as well. But like you said, you got to find the things that people want and express your creativity in that way. I think when you meet those two things together, that's where entrepreneurship really blooms. So,
agreed. All right, man. Catch you later.
Thank you so much, Chris Story. Appreciate you coming in and joining us. Brian asked a question about syndication, which I guess I'll answer in the next segment because I got nothing else going on except for some more news, some other stories. We're going to continue. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do it. Here we go. All right, back to it. One final segment for today. Yeah, we just talked to Chris about moving the segment. I was talking about it last week. I can't even remember what I was talking about last Tuesday, right before we got to Chris. But I was all wound up about something, and I just remember I was all wound up about it, and I was on fire with it. And then we got to Chris, and I was done with Chris, and I felt so I felt so mellow, and I didn't want to go back to that. Sometimes it feels good to get something off your chest, to rant away, so to speak, a little bit. But then you get all mellowed out and you're like, dude, I really don't want to, gonna harsh my mellow, kind of thing. And so I think we're probably going to move Chris to the final segment of the show on the second hour of Tuesdays. There may be times when we take him at the bottom of the hour, maybe talk a little politics. He and I got into a conversation this last week via text message. We were talking about the 2016 election and Trump and how I was apparently he heard I was bad-mouthing Trump on something. And of course, I wasn't bad-mouthing him. I was just saying that sometimes you bring things on yourself. It wasn't necessarily a bad-mouthing. It was just, how the truth is I see it kind of thing. But we had an interesting interchange on that. And I thought, well, that'd be fun to do on the air. We should do that more often where we have a little give and take. But I think we should always finish it up with a smoothing, pouring the oil on the water, so to speak, and smoothing things out. And because it's always hard after we come out of a good, positive segment with Chris to try and really get back into a groove on things that we were upset about or whatever. So anyway, I just think that's an interesting thing. I want to talk about this, the sports thing with the Board of Education. But before I get to that, let me go over here. Brian asked a question during the break because both Chris and I mentioned, or Chris mentioned it, I guess, syndication to those of us who aren't in that world. Can you explain syndication to those of us who aren't in that world? Syndication simply means that you are selling your show to various radio stations or outlets across the country, that they pay you a fee or an advertising component or something that allows them to carry your program on their station. Chris is trying to get his 1 hour show. He has a 1 hour weekend show that he's built based on kind of on top of the world and positivity and things like that. And he's trying to sell it to other stations across the state and across the country. And so that's what the process of syndication is. Just like this show is syndicated to play on radio stations and translators across the state of Alaska, so that they all carry it, together. So syndication is kind of like it's not like a franchise per se. It's that same kind of model of basically selling your show. Rush Limbaugh or one of the major news, talk radio guys, they syndicate their show to stations, hundreds of stations across the country. And each one of those stations pays, either a small bit of cash or they pay in, commercial barter time or whatever. And so that's what syndication is overall. So that's the discussion. That's the explanation for syndication. So when you hear about syndicated television shows, it's the same kind of thing. They're selling that show to a network, and then later on they sell it to Nick at Night or somebody for repeats and reruns, and that's what syndication is. So. Can you define a small bit of cash? I can't really define a small bit of cash. When I say they syndicate it for a small bit of cash for each station, I'm saying proportionally. Somebody like Rush Limbaugh was probably getting, several $1,000s from each station in cash or some kind of bartered where they could put their own advertising in the show on the local station. So it's good. Okay. What was I coming back to? I was coming back to the school board. So the Board of Education on Thursday voted to limit transgendered girls' participation in school sports. Now, they didn't eliminate it. They didn't say they couldn't participate. They just said that they couldn't participate in the girls' division of the sport. It was a vote of 7-1. When it was all said and done, what they did is they created a third division. So you have boys sports, girls sports, and then you have co-ed sport. They're not calling it co-ed sports, but basically The association plans to have 2 teams, one open to people who were assigned female at birth and one that is open to all students. And then the association, that's the Alaska School Sports Association, ASSA, that they would have, or ASAA, the Alaska School Activities Association. They would then have a second team that was open to basically to all students, and the association would use birth certificates to check the student's sex assigned at birth if there is a question to it, which I, again, see as kind of that middle ground where it allows everybody to participate, but it doesn't force this unequal advantage of people who were born biologically male and physiologically have advantages over their biological female counterparts to be able to participate in those sports. They're not trying about eliminating it. They're not, but boy, the hue and cry is just crazy. And the one lone vote against this on the school board was the student representative, and his name is Felix Myers. I find his commentary on this interesting. Let's just put it that way. This is from the Alaska Beacon. Claire Strempel writes this. She says, student representative. Okay, so first of all, let me set that up. They introduced a non-binding resolution related to the issue in March of this year. Lori Van Diest, who introduced it, said she gave a litany of examples of men's athletic superiority over women, physiological superiority over women. But student representative Felix Myers disagreed. Here's what he said. He said the body was mistakenly discussing the ideas of men participating in women's sports rather than the issue of trans women participating in women's sports. And I think he missed the whole point of this. Okay. You've got a trans woman. Okay, fine. But they were biologically born a male. That's the definition of somebody who feels like they're, gender dysphoria or whatever. They're trapped in the wrong body. They're actually a female. But the body, the base material is still a male physiology. You still have all the baked in advantages physiologically of a male over a woman. Stronger, more it has more endurance. I mean, just all these things that are generally acknowledged that's what's going on between these two things. But he's like, no, you're mistakenly discussing the idea of men participating in women's sports rather than the issue of trans women's participating. What was his suggestion instead? He suggested the board look at educating coaches on how to identify eating disorders and the issue of funding parity for travel and equipment if it wants to support girls' sports. Not that there's an unfair advantage baked into this whole thing. It's that it should be identifying First of all, that's kind of sexist. Why are you identifying eating disorders only in girls' sports? And then the issue of funding parity for travel teams. We don't have time to discuss. I'm out of time. Folks, thanks for coming in. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. I ran the clock out on that one. I'm just wrapping my brain around this whole thing. This thing is just nutty. This is the student representative. We're mistakenly discussing the idea of men participating in women's sports rather than the issue of trans women. But trans women, we're men at one point. I don't think we can disagree with that, right? That's not a disputed issue. They were biologically at one point men. So discussing men participating in women's sports is still relevant to that. I can't. All right, well, we're out of time. I ran the clock out on that one. We will see you guys tomorrow for Wednesday. Thanks for coming in and joining us. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Have a good one.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.